I'm 97 years old now. 97. That's a long time for a body to keep breathing and a mind to keep remembering things it sometimes wishes it could forget. When you get this old, you start telling the truth a little easier. Not because you're brave, but because there ain't much time left to pretend. I was born in 1928, down in Mississippi, back when the air itself seemed to carry rules about where a black body could stand and where it better not be seen. Colored signs on the doors, colored water fountains, colored schools that barely had enough books to go around. Back then, church was the only place we were allowed to breathe a little. Sunday mornings, that little wooden church down the road would fill up with voices. Women in white dresses, men in worn suits that had seen better years, gospel songs rising up through cracked windows and floating out over cotton fields. That's where I first heard about God. They said he was watching everything, said he was just, said he had a plan. I believed that. Lord, I believed it with everything inside me. When you're a little black girl growing up under Jim Crow, believing in something bigger than the world you see, that's sometimes the only thing that lets you sleep at night. My mama used to say, baby, don't question the Lord. The Lord knows what he's doing. And I held on to that for a long time. I held on to it when my daddy worked himself near to death in those fields for pennies. I held on to it when white men drove past our house slow at night, laughing like they owned the road, and us with it. I held on to it when my brother James got beaten so bad by a deputy that he never walked right again. The preacher said suffering had meaning, said God was testing us, said heaven would make it all make sense one day. When you're young, that kind of faith feels like oxygen. You breathe it without thinking. By the time I was 16, I was already working in somebody else's house, cleaning floors, washing dishes, raising somebody else's babies while my mama raised the rest of us. That's how it was for black girls back then. You grew up fast, or you didn't grow up at all. I married young too, 19 years old. His name was Robert. Quiet man, strong hands, worked at a lumber yard 12 hours a day, and still came home smelling like pine wood and sweat. We didn't have much. One little house with paint peeling off the sides and a porch that leaned a little to the left. But we had laughter. We had Sunday dinners. We had hope. 3 babies came after that, 2 boys and a girl, and I prayed over them every night. I prayed God would protect them in a world that never protected us. But the truth about life, the thing nobody tells you when you're young, is that survival comes with a price. You don't notice it right away. It's slow. Years go by. You're working, raising children, burying people you love, and little pieces of yourself start disappearing. Robert died when I was 42. Heart gave out right there in the yard. I remember standing in that hospital hallway thinking, I did everything right. We went to church, we prayed, we lived decent. So why did it feel like God kept taking things? I didn't say that out loud. Back then, questioning God felt like betrayal. In our community, faith was armor. If you admitted doubt, it was like walking outside without skin. So I kept quiet. Years rolled on. My boys grew up and moved north chasing jobs that never stayed long. My daughter married a man who promised her the world and gave her disappointment instead. That's another thing about time. It doesn't break your heart all at once. It erodes it, like water on stone. Friends started disappearing. Funerals became more common than birthdays. The church pews filled with gray heads. And still, every Sunday, we sang about a God who was always watching, but I began noticing something. The older I got, the more the world didn't seem to work the way we were told. Good people suffered. Cruel people thrived. Children died before their parents. Kind men got broken by a system built to grind them down. I watched women pray for husbands who never came home sober. Watched mothers bury sons killed by violence nobody ever answered for. And every time something terrible happened, Someone would say the same thing. It's God's plan. That phrase started sitting heavy in my chest. Because if that was true, then what kind of plan was this? I carried that question quietly for decades. Didn't speak it out loud, not in church, not in front of family. Some questions, they feel dangerous when you say them where people can hear, but age does something to you. It strips away fear. By the time you reach your 90s, you've already lost most of the people who might judge you, and you start thinking more about truth than approval. The turning point came when my youngest grandson died. Car accident, 22 years old, smart boy, gentle, always hugged me before leaving the house. That day. I remember sitting in my living room holding his photograph, and people kept coming through the door saying the same words. God needed another angel. I listened to that for hours, and something inside me finally broke because that boy didn't need to die. There was no lesson in it, no divine reason, just a drunk driver and a broken family. That night I sat alone and asked a question I had been carrying since I was a girl in Mississippi. Maybe God isn't who we were told he is. Maybe we built that idea because we needed something to hold on to while the world was tearing us apart. You see, when you grow up under systems designed to crush you, faith becomes survival. Church was the one place we had dignity. The one place white folks couldn't tell us we were less than human. So we wrapped our pain in Scripture, wrapped our fear in prayer, wrapped our uncertainty in a God who was supposed to make it all fair in the end. But life kept showing me something different. God didn't stop the lynchings. God didn't stop the segregation. God didn't stop the bullets. God didn't stop the loneliness that comes from outliving almost everyone you love. And that realization, it didn't make me angry. It made me quiet. Because I started seeing faith in a different way. Maybe God isn't some figure sitting in the sky keeping score. Maybe God is the strength people find when the world gives them nothing else. Maybe God was my mama standing up every morning to feed 6 children on almost nothing. Maybe God was Robert working until his body gave out just so his family could eat. Maybe God was the women in that church choir singing through tears nobody else saw. Maybe God was never outside us. Maybe God was always inside the way we survived. That thought changed something in me. I stopped waiting for the world to make sense. Stopped expecting justice to arrive neatly wrapped in divine timing. Life is messier than that, harder than that, but also more honest. I'm 97 now. Most of the people I started life with are gone. Sometimes I sit in this chair and the house feels too quiet, too big for one old woman and her memories. But I don't feel abandoned, not the way I used to, because I see something now that I couldn't see when I was younger. We kept each other alive, not miracles, not divine intervention, people, neighbors sharing food when cupboards were empty, women holding each other after funerals, men working themselves to the bone so their children could step a little further into freedom. That was sacred. That was holy. So when I say God might not be who you think he is, I'm not saying faith is foolish. I'm saying maybe we were looking in the wrong direction. Maybe heaven was never somewhere far away waiting after death. Maybe heaven was the love people carried through the worst parts of history, just to keep the next generation breathing. If you're listening to me right now, younger than I am, I want you to understand something. Don't let anyone tell you suffering is holy. Don't let anyone tell you injustice is part of some mysterious plan. Pain is pain, loss is loss, and pretending otherwise only hides the truth. But I will say this, human beings, we are stronger than we realize, stronger than systems, stronger than hate, stronger even than the silence that history tried to bury us in. I lived through segregation, through marches, through years when our people were told they didn't belong in their own country. And still, We endured. Still. We loved. Still. We raised children who could walk into a world we were never allowed to see. That's where the real miracle lives, not in the sky, in us. Now I'm sitting here near the end of my road. 97 years is a long story for one heart to carry. My hands shake sometimes. My eyes don't see as clear as they used to. But my mind, it remembers. It remembers the cotton fields, the gospel songs, the quiet bravery of people history barely bothered to write down. And if I'm being honest, I don't know exactly what waits after this life. Nobody does. But I do know this. The love we gave each other, that mattered. The strength we passed down, that mattered. The truth we finally spoke when we were old enough to stop being afraid, that matters too. If this story reached you, maybe hold on to that. Not fear, not blind belief, but the quiet power people carry when they choose compassion in a hard world. That might be the closest thing to God any of us will ever see. And for me, at 97 years old, that's enough.